hear the word Hun, most people think of this guy. Like most everybody else in my generation, I saw Mulan when it came out. They told me this was a Hun. As I got a little bit older, as I got more into history, became a complete nerd, I started seeing these World War I propaganda posters calling Germans Huns. What I've been wondering is, are these the same guys? Are they somehow related? And who actually was it that invaded China in that Disney movie? Then thinking back to any references to Huns in modern culture or movies like Bill and Ted or Red Dawn or Night at the Museum, I began to realize there's really a loose term on what a Hun actually is. So I started talking to people and Googling things, and nobody even knew. AI couldn't even give me a decent answer to the questions I was asking. You know you're deep in a mystery when that happens. And by this point, I had no idea what a Hun actually was, or what the word Hun actually meant, or if Huns ever actually invaded China at all. In trying to figure this all out, I embarked on this information journey that was far more confusing and convoluted than I ever could imagine. There's hardly even any right answers to any of this, and I began to realize that's basically history. So stick with me, and we'll sort this all out together. So what is a Hun, and where did they come from? Those are pretty complicated questions. So one of the first things I figured out is that Hun is actually a multi-use ethnic slur. It can be a German, as we'll see in chapter 2. It can mean just psycho-barbarian, or it can mean psycho-barbarian nomad horse archer, and it can also mean steppe people, or people from the steppe. What's the steppe? We'll look at that in just a second. The steppe. As you can see, Russian mountains to the north, China to the south, and the Gobi Desert, Europe over here. The steppe is a large area of basically grassland that's desert in the south, mountains on the north, and there's rivers running through it, lots of grass, great place for herders and nomads that follow the seasons, raise horses. It's always a confederation of tribal people. But whenever they get together, they pretty much change the world. Now we need to draw a distinction between a Hun and the Huns. This could be a whole episode on its own, but I'll give you a brief overview. The Huns are a group of psycho-barbarian nomad horse archers that came from the steppe that appeared kind of out of nowhere. Their leader was the famous Attila. This is their empire. Notice anything about where this doesn't go? Their empire was from about 370 to 469. Didn't last quite all that long, but it was pretty big, and they were ferocious. And they fucked with the Roman Empire so bad that they, most of the time, just paid them to leave them alone. They never really lost a battle, except when the Romans and the Visigoths joined up. Not those. And they didn't even actually lose that battle. They kind of just fought to a stalemate, took off, came back a year later, and then took over everything they were trying to take over in the first place. Their tactics were wild. They would do things like pretend to retreat, and then once the enemy thought they were retreating, they'd come back and murder everybody. They're excellent horsemen and archers, so all their troops were super fast, and the Romans and any conventional warfare at the time just could not handle their tactics or their speed. They could ride horses and shoot bows and arrows by the time they were 3 years old. They kept no written record, which is kind of a pretty big flex if you ask me. They didn't even know when their birth dates were. They didn't really even care. The empire kind of fell apart after Attila died. He partied too hard one night, got drunk, and just died. Now, where did the word Hun come from? Well, there was a guy named Priscus who hung out with Attila, chilled out in his court for a while, and Attila told him that they were descended from the Shan Yu. No, not that guy. Shan Yu. Put a pin in that. That's a clue. The Huns didn't call themselves anything. We have just called them the Huns, which I guess is just adapting the slur to call them psycho-barbarians, which everyone thought they were. And it's possible, but no one really knows, that translation, somehow through Chinese and Greek and whatever, kind of means the same thing or sounds like the Hun. That's a pretty big mystery that no one has really got to quite yet. Least of all me. So did Attila look like this? This honestly looks like Disney's racist version of a homeless Chinese guy, or they just took one of the Indians from Pocahontas and made his eyes slanted. It's pretty bad. But Attila actually grew up in the Roman Empire. He was a hostage. They used to trade sons as hostages to keep tensions low back then. And so he grew up as a hostage in the Roman Empire. So he was just like all the other Romans. Some accounts have him actually like a red hair and beard. Here's a couple different pictures of Attila. None of them are drawn by the Huns. They're all drawn by their enemies. So it makes sense that they try to draw him pretty savage sometimes. But then you get this guy who looks just regal, like a regular Roman citizen, maybe. I don't know. Or kind of give it a King Arthur vibe. But this is definitely not the guy. Let's talk about the German Hun. Now, you can call a German person a Hun, and they'll know you're trying to be a dick. I don't know if they'll know what that means, but by the end of this, you definitely will. I'm pretty sure I've heard it used in a Guy Ritchie movie once or twice. I figured that maybe since you could call a German a Hun, that they were descended from the Huns, from the Hun Empire, maybe. So I dug into this pretty deep. So here we go. To make this just that much more confusing, we're going to have to take the Germans and go all the way to China, but fast forward the time to 1901. This was the Boxer Rebellion. And basically, it was China trying to kick all foreign influence and foreign powers out of their country, which they tend to do from time to time, which we'll see later on. It involved the UK, Russia, France, Germany, Japan, Spain, some others. And at the time, Germany was the main exporter of lederhosen to China. I'm just kidding, that's probably not true, but it actually might be, I don't know. Now, for some reason, Kaiser Wilhelm II decided to tell his men, fight like the Huns against the uprising. And that, for some reason, stuck, and it became a slur for the German soldiers in World War I. And you could see that on all these posters. And it remained through World War II and through to today. So let's look and see if there's any actual history behind that. So going back through some German history, we all know the Third Reich was Nazi Germany for World War II. The Second Reich was Imperial Germany under Kaiser Wilhelm II. The First Reich was supposed to be the Roman Empire. I don't know if that actually makes any sense, but they definitely use a lot of the symbology and the eagles and, the big banners.
Along a dozen roads, the Iron Cross and the eagle wave in the breeze.
And all that was all Roman vibes. So if the Germans considered the Roman Empire the First Reich or reign of the German people, then they definitely wouldn't be descended from the Huns, because the Huns were enemies to the Romans. So that doesn't make any sense. So I thought maybe, are the Huns some of the Germanic tribes that eventually turned into the modern day German? And some of the Germanic tribes that were conquered by the Roman Empire did join the Roman Empire, so maybe there's that route. Well, no, actually. Many of the Germanic tribes that ended up settling the area that's now Germany actually were running from the Huns, because though they were barbarians, the Huns were so wild and savage that it scared them down into the Germanic areas, and that's where they settled Germany. So no, there's no Hun lineage in Germans. So there's no actual reason that you would ever call a German person a Hun and be accurate. It makes really no sense. I don't know why Wilhelm decided to use that. Maybe it was because it was the most savage thing he could think of. Who knows? But a German person is not a Hun unless you just want to use the word Hun as a crazy insult. But they were in no way related to the actual Huns that we're talking about. So were the Huns that invaded and took over a lot of Europe the same Huns that invaded China way over in the east from Mulan? As we saw earlier, this is the extent of the Hun Empire. And this is China. So who did invade China? This is the Mongol Empire. Here's the Hun Empire. So then, Did Disney just mistake the Huns for the Mongols? Are the Mongols the Huns? Well, that one's kind of easy to figure out. The Mongol Empire started around the 1200s, went to around the 1500s, or further, depending on where you actually mark the end of the empire. As you can see, pretty much everything in the known world. And as we saw, the Hun Empire was 300s and 400s. The problem is that the Mongol Empire did take over China. They definitely were not stopped by a little twink boy, some singing soldiers, a lizard,
Dragon.
or even a wall. There wasn't a wall at the time. They didn't build the Great Wall of China until the Mongol Empire fell and they kicked all the Mongols out, and then they built the wall. Genghis Khan took over all of northern China. Then his son Ogedei ruled. The grandson Kublai Khan took over the rest of China. He didn't just take over, he declared himself the emperor of China and became kind of Chinese, so we can rule them out. Those were definitely not the Huns. If you ever wondered why there's Mongolian beef on every Chinese restaurant menu, that's why. So who else invaded China? The Shan Yu did. No, not that guy. The Shan Yu had an empire in the 200s, and Shan Yu is not what they called themselves. That's what the Chinese people called them. And it was, yes, you guessed it, a slur. It just meant bastards, freed slaves, nomads, steppe people. And Modo Chan Yu was not a name, it was a title. And it actually later became Khan. But this guy's name being Shan Yu doesn't mean anything. It's not even a name. It sounds like they were just using a bunch of words they found in a Chinese dictionary to try to throw together a story. So who was Disney even talking about? I'm not a huge fan of Disney myself. Now, in my opinion, the only Disney movie that was really any good was The Great Mouse Detective. Maybe Lilo and Stitch. In fact, I'm not alone in this. J.R.R. Tolkien, one of the greatest fantasy writers in human history, really had a problem with Disney because they used to take fairy tales that actually meant something, that had a meaning on a deeper level, and turn them into basically, if you're a princess and you get lucky, you might get everything you want. If a guy kisses you, that type of thing. So it stripped all of the lessons out of it, and it just made it kind of silly. But I wanted to be objective about this and not just assumed that Disney had fucked it all up. Now, when the Zhang Yu Empire fell, everybody just went west and kind of disappeared into the steppe. And when the Huns popped up in the same area, some people theorized that the Huns were descended from the Shan Yu. No one's actually been able to prove that right or wrong because DNA testing is pretty much unhelpful because there's so many different types of people with a bunch of different DNAs that live in the steppe together. They did find some pottery that the Huns made that was in the same style that the Shan Yu did, so that was kind of a clue. However, they were used in completely different ways. So there is no answer to this question. There's no definitive yes or no whether the Shan Yu are the Huns. Now, if you look at the translation from Shan Yu to Hun, it's possible that Hun is a version of Shan Yu, which you saw earlier, and maybe that's where it came from. So maybe Disney accidentally got it right. So was it the Shan Yu that they're talking about? But now let's go look at the actual Ballad of Mulan. Now, if I'd have looked into this first, I could have probably saved some time. But I didn't. I took the long way around. The Ballad of Mulan is an actual Chinese ballad, and it was written 380 to 580 sometime, and it is about a young girl who took her father's place, or her grandfather's place, I don't remember, in the war. So that's real. Whether or not the actual story happened, no one's sure of, but they did write a song about it. So who was the bad guys in the Ballad of Mulan? Well, that was the Roaring Cognate. A new player has entered the chat. So those were definitely not the Huns. Not the Huns as we know them that had the empire with Attila, and not even the Huns that came from a racial slur for the Shan Yu people, had absolutely nothing to do with Huns at all. Completely different. Now, Disney did go back and make the live action version of Mulan with the actual Roaring Cognate. I didn't even know that. I haven't seen it. I heard it wasn't good. But at least they did fix that one historical error. So there you have it. Were the Huns from Disney's Mulan The same Huns that actually existed. And did they ever invade China? Are they related to Germans? No. And yes, Disney completely fucked up the whole thing. Basically, by using a slur to make a bad guy. Not very progressive, Disney. In conclusion, the Germans have no lineage to the actual Huns. It was just a nickname that stuck because Kaiser Wilhelm von Bürgermeister II thought that it sounded cool. The actual Huns, as we know the people and as history calls them, did not invade China ever. The villains that Disney made up for their movie Mulan are based in no actual reality, but just a bunch of slurs. So, like I always say, no one really knows what happens, and there are no right answers. That's history for you. According to the Big Book of Lego Facts and the official Lego minifigure historic timeline, they have the Hun warrior sitting right here in the 5th century. That checks out. You can see the Roman emperor and the Roman commander here right next to him. So with everything we've learned, let's make the Lego Hun warrior look a little more historically accurate. First things first, let's get rid of these stupid horns. Huns definitely didn't wear horns. Neither did Vikings. I don't know why they always use them. But this hat looks pretty cool. And it was definitely cold in the steppe, so that looks like it'll keep your ears warm. Now, this guy's head looks like a kung fu master from a 70s movie. Or maybe that's what your grandpa would call an oriental. I thought it was pretty cool. Some of the accounts had Attila as a ginger, and a lot of the pictures you see have him with a full beard. So we're just gonna go with this guy. All right, so now let's look at this sword. I had a couple cool sword options, and I thought a curved sword would be kind of neat, but those were much later, really, with the Mongols and things like that. And Attila's actual sword, the Sword of God or the Sword of Mars, was a straight sword. And although this one looks kind of like a broadsword, the fact that it's straight really works for a Hun sword. So we'll leave it. However, Huns weren't really known for their swords. They were known for the archery. Pop that guy out. So I found 2 different bows in my Lego cache. This one is smaller, which would be more accurate because they were very mobile and they had smaller bows. This is a recurve, which is accurate to the type of bow they used. And they actually invented the compound bow, which is made of multiple materials, so they bent at different times, giving them a lot more strength and force, and they were able to make them smaller, like this. But I think the recurve looks cooler, so we're going to put the recurve on there. I don't really like these pants. They look like cut-off Dickies like we used to wear back in the day. They're not very regal, but we'll just go ahead and leave them. Yeah. We're really only missing one thing, but maybe the most important thing. A Hun is not a Hun without his horse.